Yate Victor Pascual Yenishet, Twitichi Ninishni Nakai Maya, Bashichi Trabaha Dashiche, Nakai Maya Dashanale. Good afternoon. My name is Victor Pascual. I'm Navajo and Mayan from Farmington, New Mexico. I was born in Shiprock, speaking to you today from Minneapolis, Minnesota, Dakota Territory. And I was born in Shiprock, New Mexico, located in the northwest corner of New Mexico and the northern tip of the Navajo Nation. And I grew up in Farmington, just south of Farmington, actually, on the reservation where my parents still live today. And here's a photo of a neon sign outside the Tota Theater in downtown Farmington. Tota is the Navajo name for Farmington. Really interesting history with the sign. So I went to high school, graduated in the year 2000, and that's sort of the start of my design career. I took a graphic design class in high school and just kind of kept with it throughout undergrad. I attended undergraduate school at Fort Lewis College in Durango, Colorado, where I got my Bachelor's of Arts degree in visual communication. And shortly thereafter, I moved to Seattle. I have family up there who I lived with for quite a while. Found myself looking for a design job and ended up doing contract work for a local sort of staffing agency. Ultimately landing my first design job at a firm called GA Creative, located in Bellevue, which kickstarted my career in the field of corporate graphic design. I was introduced to really large clients, Microsoft being one of them, and ended up working within that community for a few years before ultimately sort of going out on my own and reestablishing new work relationships with friends that I've met in undergrad. And in 2008, I ended up launching my full studio, Digital Navajo, which was inspired by not only the work that I was doing, but also there was another local firm in Seattle that did motion graphics. They were called Digital Kitchen. And the spinoff was, hey, what if I did something like Digital Navajo? It stuck, and I really enjoyed that. The work was coming in pretty quickly. And here's a photo of Seattle. So I ended up leaving Seattle in 2012, coming back to New Mexico, really in search of my home place. Ended up in Albuquerque. And at the time, I didn't sort of realize where my direction would be heading with, my design firm, new clients. There was a point where I was struggling with my work as a designer. I mostly wanted really to do more with graphic design and do more with two-dimensional design, but also, I guess, find purpose in what I was doing. And ultimately, I ended up going back to school. I enrolled at the University of New Mexico in the architecture program and ended up getting my Master's of Architecture in 2017 and worked at a local firm until the end of the 2019. But within that, I was pretty grateful because in graduate school, there was a lot of opportunity to, really reconnect with not only my culture, but also like-minded folks as well. And at the University of New Mexico, I was introduced to a group of students, as well as a department, the Indigenous Design and Planning Institute, which to me at that time was very new. They had been around a while, but the people running the program were doing really cool stuff. Like they were integrating, Indigenous knowledge using the conversations of designing within Indigenous communities and applying that into the architecture program. In addition to having additional student colleagues who are also Indigenous as well. I have a number of Navajo friends who are architects who are working in the field today, and that was really inspiring. Today, I live in Minneapolis. I work at a firm called DSGW Architecture. I started in 2021, actually, and I will get back to this here shortly. I kind of want to step back and reintroduce Digital Navajo. So here are a few images of some of the work that I had done within the past 2 decades, various projects working with various multiple clients, specifically in the Pacific Northwest, but also in the Southwest as well. I won't really talk too much about this. You can visit my website to learn more about these projects. So what I want to sort of touch on today is, Indigenous design knowledge, right? Like what is Indigenous design knowledge? And with that, I have a few projects that I want to share. So in 2017, this was during my graduate school, at the end of my graduate school career. At that point, I had consumed, I had really dove into so much knowledge around, accessing community knowledge from different tribes. And there was so much information that I had gained through my graduate school experience that I really wanted to apply to my professional work as a graphic designer. So I was given the opportunity to take on a project in Pendleton, Oregon for the Yellowhawk Tribal Health Center. And they had previously worked with a designer who presented a few options which didn't really work for them. Yellowhawk, the first obvious choice was an image of a hawk, which didn't work for them. So I sat down with them to concept and to collaborate. We had many discussions about, well, what are some of the important things that we want to speak? What's the narrative that we want to share in this new identity? And a few of the themes really centered on the people. So Pendleton services specifically three tribal nations. So in the design of the logo, our goal was to speak to that, was to capture, the local narrative of that region. For example, in this design, we have 4 directions, 3 triangles to represent the 3 different nations, the 3 mountains, the 3 stars for the people, the Columbia River, as well as the roots, which, is within their historical worldview, which they practice as a people. And the logo was a success. They loved it. They printed it. Simultaneously, they launched a new facility, brand new architecture. You can visit their website. They have a narrative explaining their process. And I also have this on my website as well. There's a few photos of them using this logo in various instances. It was really cool to see that. Here's another project that I completed for the Albuquerque Area Indian Health Board. And this project was another conversation point between the client and myself. We talked about this idea of healing, right? Like what is the goal of something like this when we're presenting this in medical facilities, but also, trying to provide awareness for our elders in the communities. So I ended up looking at, what are themes that I could pull from the Navajo narrative of healing, and referencing our sand paintings was kind of a priority. I had presented this to the client. They loved it. So moving forward, this would be the theme that I'd use for the project. And just sort of a note on the sand painting. This type of a sand painting holds a few different significant meanings. And the first one being that sand paintings are generally used in traditional ceremonies. They have a function for the ceremonies. And oftentimes when these ceremonies are completed, the sand paintings are then destroyed. It's a really beautiful sort of indigenous sort of way of working with the earth and, healing, medicine, and the in recent years, a lot of sand paintings have become more of an art form. So you'll see a lot of these being sold in the Southwest. So that previous logo was a response to this, sort of bringing this into the context. So moving into architecture, Brian Skeet had mentioned and talked a little bit about the Hogan yesterday. I don't know if you guys were able to catch that, but I wanted to kind of jump into that a little quickly to kind of explain sort of my worldview and how I'm bringing this into not only my graphic design work, but more importantly, my architectural work, which I haven't really shared much, or I don't have a website to share any of the work, just because I'm still new in this profession and I'm still trying to understand, architecture, design, like how to design for the built environment. So here's an example of a diagram for a Navajo Hogan, which was released by the Navajo Nation Museum. So you'll see there are 4 cardinal directions. When you enter the Hogan, you come through the east in a clockwise direction. And each direction also resembles the mountains that are found in our creation story as Navajo people. So here's a diagram that I designed in graduate school when I was taking a Navajo design and planning class. This diagram encompasses the Hogan as a central component to telling our narrative as Navajo people and how we, navigate the earth. And if you look at it from plan view, it becomes a Hogan essentially. But this would be a diagram that would help me to better understand how to use Indigenous knowledge in a project specifically for architecture. And I think in context of graphic design, I'm still trying to understand how that would work. So here's an example project that I want to share. So this is a project site located in Red Mesa, Arizona. And really looking at this project site in plan view, you'll see 2 square boxes down on the site. So these are placement orientation of buildings, and using the diagram, my goal was to find a way to use this knowledge to shape the orientation of a building. And you'll see these yellow lines, these sight lines that that point to locations of landforms, Chaco Canyon, Shiprock, Monument Valley, Mesa Verde, but also, they're all nestled within the 4 sacred mountains. So this diagram that I had worked on sort of helps me to really use this Indigenous knowledge to place not only the buildings, but also to think about, how a building responds to, these specific landforms. Chaco Canyon is interesting. Noah did share a little bit about that. The architecture is very very interesting. There's so much written about this, and there's so much knowledge that is within this place. I feel like we're still trying to understand, right, how they navigated and how they built their spaces, but the alignments to winter, summer solstices, star alignments, like these are all examples and ways of how we can incorporate some of this knowledge into the work that we do. Here's a sketch produced by Oneida architect Chris Cornelius, who is also director of the School of Architecture at UNM. And in this plan view, this is a section of a building that he quickly sketched. You'll see acknowledgement to the winter solstice, and above you'll see an opening which frames and centers, certain star constellations. And here's a quick project that I did in graduate school, the Fourth World of Light, using the Navajo creation story to center this knowledge. This is sort of I feel like this is kind of a lifelong exploration of using this knowledge to shape architecture. At this point, this was more of an experiment using rammed earth to shape the walls, using daylight to shape the space. Other architects. So in the field of Indigenous architecture, there are so many architects in this country, but also in Canada as well, internationally. Here's an image of a landscape architect piece produced by architect John Paul Jones, based in Seattle, who's Cherokee. So I really like this image because it shows sort of their response to the wildlife, bringing that wildlife across a pathway in which they would not be able to. And that was sort of the premise of this particular project. I believe this is located in Vancouver, Washington. Jones and Jones Architecture, if you Google that, you can learn more about this project. They have a lot more information. So circling back to my work today, DSGW, a lot of the work we do is focused here in Minnesota, but also in the Dakotas. This particular project is for the Lakudere Tribal University. And this is a general concept in plan view. And in the image, you'll see a power grounds, which is connected to the main form of a building. So a lot of that Indigenous knowledge that those worldviews of the people of that region had shaped the master plan of this particular project, and the placement and orientation of certain walls within the building frame a lot of those elements within the sky. There's so much to talk about this, but there's not a whole lot of time, so I'm just trying to provide a brief summary. So that's sort of an example of how I use this knowledge within the field of architecture. And going back to graphic design, I think that's something that I'm trying to understand now. Of course, it's a lifelong study, and I can't really figure this out all at once. I think a lot of time, needs to be spent understanding worldviews, and how to navigate, how to respond to a design problem. So on a final note, the question, why is this all important? Like, why do we need to think about Indigenous design knowledge within our work? And, within the past year, within the past decade or so, there's been a lot of appropriation of our design, right? Of our work. It's become pretty clear that Navajo patterns have been appropriated on the pop cultural level, but also I'm beginning to see like this trend of non-native designers, stepping up to appropriate our work without understanding the meaning behind the work itself. And it becomes problematic because, they sort of set a precedent for, what, at least in terms of Navajo, they set a precedent for what Navajo design should look like. Unfortunately, that's something that I feel like, Navajo designers, we have to really work hard against to not have our work, be referenced in this manner. And in worst case scenarios, the appropriation of our work, has been used in some of the worst ways possible. Here's an image of whirling logs, a symbol used by not only Navajo culture, but also indigenous cultures on a global level. We all know where this ended up, and I believe this particular weaving predates the German political rising that had happened in the 1930s. But I wanted to just kind of shed light on that. I know this is an entirely different discussion, so there's so much to talk about. And yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit about some of this work. But thank you so much for participating and attending the conference. It's been really amazing to see everyone's work. And yeah, best of luck with everyone and their projects. I'm really excited to see that we're doing such amazing work, and I can't wait to see the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.